Today on The Independent, Pete and I talk more about Notre Dame's Week 1 win at Texas A&M and preview Week 2, the home opener against Northern Illinois. Plus, friend of the show, Stanford Steve, joins the pod after taking in Notre Dame's win on College Gameday.
Welcome to the latest episode of The Independent. I'm Pete Sampson, joined as always by my co-host Matt Fortuna. We're back in our respective homes after broadcasting from Kyle Field. It's much quieter. We're much closer to the ground. But there's still a lot to unpack there. Some injury updates. We can get into Marcus Freeman's explanation or kind of reasoning behind why he was as fired up as he was before the game. Because coaches emoting was kind of in the news this week. Some did it more naturally than others.
I have no idea what you're talking about, Pete.
I don't know, but I am quite angry, Matthew.
But he hit Brian Kelly, who I believe you're talking about, hit that podium so hard that the water bottle did not fall off.
I'm assuming somebody asked him what the first next steps are after the loss to USC.
Let's go right into that. I mean, I've been a little taken aback by the discussion online about Marcus Freeman's emotions in Week 1. Yeah, that was the biggest game he's coaching probably.
Yeah.
Get fired up for it. And in an environment louder than anything he's ever played in or coached in. Go for it. That's called reading your football team. Now, yeah, if you do that every week, if you do that for Miami of Ohio and NIU, it becomes tired. But that to me is, and you wrote this in your mailbag, it's like Clark Lee headbutted a guy one game.
Yeah.
That's completely out of character for Clark Lee. He's not going to do that every single game, but he felt that's what his team needed in the moment. And Marcus Freeman absolutely felt that's what his team needed in the moment. And they went out there and they played with a passion and vigor and a fire that helped lead them to victory.
Yeah, and I think that it's the moment, but also who's standing right behind Marcus Freeman when he's doing that? The offensive line that has six career starts. It's I don't think you need to do that for Riley Leonard or Jack Kaiser or Benjamin Morrison or Xavier Watts. You do need to do that for Anthony Knapp, Sam Pendleton, etc. And I was traded a couple of texts with Jared Patterson this week, and he referenced man, when I saw that, I was ready to run through my TV, and how it reminded him of when Marcus was a coordinator and he could cut loose a lot more. He remembers that version of Marcus being pretty commonplace in 2021 when he was just the DC. So maybe I think that's more of the authentic Marcus Freeman coming out. I think that's his default settings are much more towards that than they are measured, kind of calm, introspective. So it was kind of the right move for the right time with the right team. It's kind of hard to say did it make a difference or not? I don't know. But I did ask Anthony Knapp that on Tuesday after Access, and he says yeah, it was just all right, it just kind of shakes you up a little bit. And I think that may be what that offensive line needed in that moment, because they were going against probably the most difficult test they'll face all season, and they were the least prepared for it they possibly will be all year because they had never done it together before.
You caught a retweet from Cam Hayward of the Pittsburgh Steelers, former Marcus Freeman teammate. Yeah, he retweeted your video, and he said, "This is the free I know at Marcus Freeman, Marcus_Freeman1." And yes, like you said, probably a little bit more like Marcus Freeman, the player. Let's not forget, he's 38 years old. He's a lot closer to, in some cases, a lot closer to his players' ages than he is than some of the guys who are on his staff. I'm shocked we're even talking about this. I'm shocked this even came up as a question in your mailbag. Now, look, if they went out and laid an egg, yeah. Did Freeman have him not in the right mode? Sure, that's fair. But yeah, while we're on the subject, Brian Kelly was emotional as well after he lost his third straight season opening win at LSU. He pounded his fist on a table, and I believe he said, "I'm angry." And look, again, coaches got to find different ways to get their messages across. I'm not saying one's good, bad, right, or wrong. Me and you have been in press conference rooms, and it's always different when you're in the room because you can feel it. We've been in rooms where he's gotten angry, and it's, I wouldn't say scary, but you're okay, who's asking the next question? He's about to get his head ripped off. that to me, at least watching on TV, felt very performative. It just didn't. Once he started talking after that in a normal tone, it just felt, all right, I got to say or do something here so these guys respond. It wasn't like I'm going to lose my stuff right now.
Yeah, we've been in the room with him when he's gone off, and it's much more of a sarcastic cutting approach than it is trying to figure out a way to show that you are genuinely angry, which inevitably comes across as inauthentic. But yeah, maybe his season openers peaked with Jonathan Dorr banging in that 50-plus yard field goal at Florida State and then calling for his team to be executed. I don't. Maybe that was as good as it was ever going to get.
How can we forget that one? Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the real takeaway from this one on a Notre Dame podcast, as much joy as a lot of people got out of seeing Brian Kelly lose, I said Notre Dame's going to be favored in every game the rest of the year. I don't know if maybe there's a look ahead line at USC based on what we saw from, albeit just one game of USC. I don't want to react to one game, but wait, they play defense now.
Yeah.
And much like Iowa's offense, if they're just competent on that side of the ball with what they have in USC's case, the offensive side, that's a damn good football team. And it's a football team that schedule isn't actually, once they get through LSU, their Big Ten schedule is not among the toughest, in my opinion.
I mean, it's crazy to think a couple of weeks ago, the vibe on USC was are they going to be just a triage locker room by the time that Notre Dame comes out there? And then they win the game and you're like, well, wait a minute, maybe the schedule is a little bit easier than we thought. Because they got the first one out of the way. But I mean, the most important thing was they actually play defense. I still think it's a good matchup for Notre Dame because Notre Dame's secondary is an elite group. But I think we've probably sort of flipped Florida State and USC by this point, right? In terms of the back half game where you're oh, that will be a real test. One where I think Notre Dame will be favored, but still a real test. But yeah, I would much rather, from a college football fan point of view, I would much rather Notre Dame USC be a marquee game than Notre Dame Florida State be a marquee game, because Notre Dame USC, that it's the marquee game that usually is not. Very rarely in the last 25 years have both been top 25 teams. But man, it certainly looks like this has a chance they could both be certainly top 20, maybe top 10.
Yeah, and I got to say, through all the summer discourse of will this rivalry exist into the future, and I believe there's just one more on paper scheduled game beyond this year between the two, and they're trying to extend that right now. I threw out on social media, and I know it's a very reactionary environment, an emotional fueled environment, but I threw out the Larry David gif of how Notre Dame's feel. Brian Kelly loses, Notre Dame or USC wins, and it was a tire fire mentions, but the vast majority, when you just skim through them, are no, we want USC, screw Brian Kelly. And I get the screw Brian Kelly thing if you're a Notre Dame fan. They felt that way when he was still at Notre Dame. But I can't see Auburn fans feeling that way about Alabama. I can't see Ohio State fans feeling that way about Michigan or Oklahoma and Texas. It's a very important rivalry. It's a great Jersey game, as our friend Stanford Steve, who joins the show later, mentions. But I was wait a minute, for a rival, you're a little too giddy, in my opinion. And again, I know it brings great joy to many among Notre Dame Nation to see Brian Kelly in near tears, but that one was interesting. But again, it's great. Emotions and rivalries aside, great result for Notre Dame because they need the schedule boost. And yeah, USC looks like a team that we'll see. I mean, look, they go to Michigan in a couple of weeks. I think we'll know what we need to know about Michigan this week after Texas. They host Penn State and Wisconsin. Those look much more winnable than they did a week ago. And then they host Notre Dame in the regular season finale. It'll be interesting. I mean, what if USC does have that kind of season and they've already locked up a spot in the Big Ten title game as they go into the Notre Dame game? I think it was a similar scenario with the Pac-12 2 years ago. Last time Notre Dame went to USC. But Lincoln Riley brought up that exact scenario at Big Ten Media Day this year of how do we prepare for a playoff? For our last game's non-conference game, do we rest guys? And he was saying it much more hypothetically than specific to this, but all sorts of interesting dynamics, I think, are still very much in play after week 1 for Notre Dame in their schedule.
Yeah, because I mean, look, Notre Dame, they already have the marker with the SEC because of the A&M win. A&M hosts Missouri, LSU, and Texas. So Notre Dame will have a point of comparison against those 3 teams that are all vying for at-large bids. They'll have a point of comparison. I don't know how much Purdue is relevant, but like USC, you said Michigan, Penn State, those are teams vying. LSU was teams vying for at-large bids. So it for a schedule that lacks much juice on the home side of it, the road part, which you could argue is more valuable, you get more points for winning a road game than you do at home. Like I think Notre Dame's schedule got better for Notre Dame over the weekend. If you know that the net,
if you end the weekend Sunday night, yes,
yeah. If the net of losing Florida State but gaining USC is a win for Notre Dame once everything shakes out. But a couple news items that I don't think we had podcasts. Jordan Faison, indeed, ankle injury. Marcus Freeman said out 1 to 2 weeks, most likely. Mitchell Evans played just 10 snaps in the game. Only one of them was a run, ended up being a run play. It was essentially a third down, only tight end. I may be reading between the lines, but it sounds like that may go on for a while. It is always worth remembering that he tore his ACL at the end of October last year. So we're really at 10 months post injury. So I wonder if that will be a situation by this first bye week, October. Maybe you come back for Stanford with a little bit more of Mitchell Evans, or do you wait even to the second bye week into November? Because the way Notre Dame's season is shaping up, they're certainly going to play 13 games. Good chance of 14, and who knows after that. I mean, you could still get a lot of Mitchell Evans even if he doesn't see the field like in full until November.
Yeah, these next 3 weeks, I think would be a great time to get his backups more meaningful playing time, to get them used to that spotlight and that stage. I do wonder, let's have this conversation the week of the Louisville game and see where he is. Because that's one where I think it's going to be all hands on deck. That's their hardest home game of the year. That's a game where obviously there's revenge on the mind after last year. That's the date I would have circled as far as, can he be close to the past version of himself by then? But certainly a great time to develop the guys behind him right now. And as you were talking, I looked up, there is a look ahead line on FanDuel for Notre Dame USC. Notre Dame 1.5 point favorites.
All right. Based on 1 week, that sounds about right. Like, 2 good teams, and Notre Dame goes on the road. But
I'll say Notre Dame proved they can win in as tough an environment as there is. So I don't know what the venue value is there.
No, very, very little. Although when USC is good, people turn out. And who knows if USC will still be sort of humming along at the rate they are now. I will agree. Like the next 3 weeks, all hands on deck for Louisville. But to me, the most important part of Northern Illinois, Purdue, Miami is, can you get your offensive line to go from 6 starts to 11 starts to 16 starts to 21 starts? That's pretty important. I think the position did well, graded on a curve after I went back and rewatched the game, but I wouldn't say that it just like empirically did well. And nor should it have in week 1. It was. I enjoyed talking to Anthony Knapp on Tuesday at Player Access because he was, as offensive linemen often are, pretty introspective about like, hey, I'm going out there, I'm nervous, I get the first hit in, it feels good. But then also said like, then I'm feeling myself and I'm like, I think I can handle Scorton. And then he puts a spin move on me and I'm like, oh crap. Like, so I think he came a long way on Saturday night. And if he is a regular interview for the next 4 years, we're in good shape from a media point of view around Notre Dame.
Well, it's funny because I feel like, especially now in like the player podcast era, you see so many either retired guys or ex-college guys, anytime they're on a show or anytime they're recording something, what was my welcome to college football moment? Or here's when I realized this isn't high school anymore. We're seeing this in real time with this guy at the most important position on the offensive line, where he's getting baptized by fire going into SEC country for his first game. and holding up reasonably well. Steve mentions this in our conversation, like forget scheme, forget everything, just any way possible, figure out a way to get a win. That was the MO for this team and for this group going into A&M, and they did that. And now's when you take the step back, you coach them up on what they can do better. You look at where the faults are, and you process things much more clearly if you're a guy like Anthony Knapp, who's doing this for the first time. And that's where I think this schedule, at least the early part of it, really benefits these guys growing into those roles.
Yeah, it was a big gamble to open at A&M, but you won it. And now you get a chance to sort of take a step back and develop your roster a little bit more on a not 4-alarm fire basis, where you're not worrying about crowd noise or communication anymore. It's just like, how can we get Knapp and Pendleton to see blitzes a little bit better? How can we get Kingston Viliamasa more reps on the interior? Can we run Riley Leonard less? The pass game with Leonard on Saturday left quite a bit to be desired, but I think that Notre Dame knew that was exactly how it was going to look before the game started. I mean, yeah, Denbrock talked about this during Access on Tuesday. It was called a game to whatever the heck you had to do to win it, do that. If that meant running halfback dive 10 straight times, so be it. And I think, Denbrock did a really nice job on Saturday night of just sort of kind of holding himself back. And I wrote this in my final thoughts. Like, I think we think of good coaching as leaning into your strengths. Sometimes good coaching is making sure your weaknesses don't kill you. And I thought they did a great job of that on Saturday.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Nate Tice, I believe, has Riley Leonard as number 1 on his big board among quarterbacks.
Maybe he should be a future independent guest.
Well, last time that happened with Notre Dame playing in a Texas environment, Deshaun Kaiser came out as Matt Miller's number 1 pick in the draft that week. And we all thought, I believe Corey Robinson was a first-round pick on that same mock.
Yes.
Look, mock drafts, if you take them seriously, are very, very hard. But
Connor Wigman, first-round pick.
Yeah, a lot of people had that, and we'll see how that shakes out. But yeah, there's a lot to work on. There's a lot to build on, but it's a lot easier to learn and grow after a win than it is after a loss. And I just thought, again, all the program elements of what Marcus Freeman wants and his team were on display in a moment like that. By any means necessary, be the better conditioned team. Don't flinch. And don't make that killer mistake that was going to turn that already loud environment into something you were just not going to be able to overcome. And that's where it really helps to have a veteran like Riley Leonard under center to make sure that 0 is an okay play, even if that's not what you want in real time.
Yeah, and 2 veteran coordinators to make sure that happens too, and game plans on both sides of the ball. So overall, it was kind of hard to ask for anything more than what Notre Dame showed on Saturday night. We will get, after a break, into our interview with Stanford Steve from ESPN, talk a little College Gameday, working with Nick Saban, and a lot of Notre Dame personnel talk. And then after that, Matt and I will come back to talk a little bit more about Northern Illinois and predictions, where, as any listener can tell you, Matt is 1-0 and I'm 0-1 this year. So we will get to predictions after our interview up next with Stanford Steve.
The college football season is back, and we're thrilled to keep our partnership going with Roback on The Independent. You've probably seen their new licensed line of Notre Dame apparel, hoodie, quarter zip, polos, and how they partnered with Riley Leonard and Benjamin Morrison. You can get all that gear plus everything else on Roback.com for 20% off with the promo code IRISH. That's all your Notre Dame gear for tailgating, game day, and however else you want to get outside. For 20% off, just visit Roback.com and use promo code IRISH.
Game tied at 13. Ball is spotted directly between the 2 hashes, and it's a shotgun set. 2 receivers, 2 tight ends, and loves the back. He's to the right of Leonard, and he'll get the handoff. Running up the middle, squirts through, across the 10, inside the 5, and he's into the end zone! Jeremiah Love! You know the vibes, baby! Touchdown, Notre Dame! With 1:54 to go, the Irish are back on top!
All right, pleased to welcome to The Independent return guest. Matt and I both saw him on the sidelines at Kyle Field last weekend. You saw him on College Gameday along with 2.5 million other people, apparently. Most watched pre-November game day ever. Steve, is that right? Thanks for coming on the show. You got to be in demand. All these people are watching you.
I've been doing stuff all morning. I think the one note I saw was most watched since a Columbus show, I believe, at 16. I'm guessing that was Harbaugh, the first Harbaugh Urban game possibly. But yeah, it was great. I thought we got off to a great start over in Ireland. Ton of fun over there. Coach Saban's been unbelievable. Like the ultimate, when a man speaks in a meeting, no one is doing anything. Like every eyeball. I mean, it's not even taking notes. It's like, all right, I have to get eye contact here because I got to listen and I got to remember what the heck he's saying because then I'm going to write it down. But I don't want to be writing it down while he's talking. So it's been great. It really has. He's just so smart. That's all I could say is the way he looks at things. And, Cam Ward, for example, he can't, I think we were in Ireland. He's like, yeah, I want to watch this. I was like, I'm really interested to see what you think of Cam Ward. And he came in just blown, like had 9 strengths. What you got to try and make him do. And like, it was like being in the coach's office again, getting ready for a game, like just the way he broke it down. So it's been awesome. Herbie and Pat, obviously what they bring to the table. Reese is even more of a maestro with another person on the desk. And Des has been great. Des got a piece with Sherrone Moore this week that we're fired up for an all access. So we're up and running. We're in it, as you guys are, starting that off with a week 1 road trip. And, you're trying to find yourself after you pick up everything from week 1.
What'd you think of the environment? I know it wasn't your first time there, but
Yep.
Obviously a lot of theatrics. I think I was next to your pregame when Freeman was coming out. And what do you think of the way Notre Dame handled that environment? Because no matter how good or bad A&M is in a given year, they've beaten some pretty good teams in that venue.
I thought I had an awesome pregame video as they're in the tunnel, and damn, Pete was in front of me, so there's no heads in front of his, where mine's I'm trying to reach over because that's exactly what I wanted to see. It was my first time there, Matt, with everything being done at the stadium. I was there, the Manziel game while they got all the money to finish one of the end zones. I mean, I can't believe that's 12 years ago, but it was way hotter, if you can imagine that, when I was there last time. So I wanted to see how Notre Dame was going to handle it. Talking to people at the hotel from South Bend, they drove. I think they left Tuesday and drove, and they were talking about how it was in the 90s in South Bend. So, they were fired up that they got that, knowing what they were walking into. But I thought with all the change, and I'm sure you guys spent plenty of time connecting the dots of Riley and Elko and where Denbrock came from and Colin Klein, like all this. No, I wanted to see the mindset of Notre Dame. I loved just knowing what they had on defense, in particular, what they had in the secondary. That's where I thought, A&M might have to go. Knowing Wigman is a better thrower or I should say more of a thrower than a runner. I thought Jordan Clark was a great add. I just look at the dynamic of him on being on a not good football team for multiple years, Arizona State, and always having to be in charge on the back end where you're facing, Caleb Williams and Bo Nix, like all these Pac-12 teams. The idea of a kid that now he has confidence in the guy he's talking to, you know what I mean? With Morrison, on the edge, and Watts is next to him too. So I love that. I'm having another quarterback, knowing the youth that they had, and then going back and watching the tape, whether it's 34, 27, 4. I mean, those guys, the physicality they brought to the game was really, really impressive. You talk about all that came into with the environment and what they had to do. And then with Denbrock, I thought you got to go there and just win the game. Do what you have to do to win the game. You're gonna get some evolution with the offense as guys get, more comfortable with each other. And Riley not doing spring ball or, not to the stature that you want your quarterback. I do think that's a process. And with the home schedule the way it is, that's what I look at to possibly, not change, but see growth in the offense is what they do offensively. I thought in person, Jeremiah Love stood out. When he got the ball, it was like, whoa, how fast is this guy? So I was blown away. The survival tactics that Anthony Knapp had to go in that and just give it your all and knowing that you're only going to get better. Like that is I was at practice Thursday and I'm just looking at Scorton and Turner. I'm like, man, these guys are put together. And not knowing anything about Knapp, I'm like, all right, I'm guessing he's prototypical big boy, close to 300 pounds. And then you see him in there and he's hanging around, man. He was giving effort right off the jump. And it was really, really cool to see. Being in awe of how that can be coming in as a high school kid into that environment, knowing you're not going to get the best communication, knowing that you're on an island, knowing that the face of your program is your job to protect them. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. Game balls, whatever you want to give Knapp. I really, really thought the world of the kid in that effort.
Do you think like winning down there changes the perception of Notre Dame a little bit? Because it's been a while since they've gone on the road and won in an SEC venue. This isn't going to Alabama it's not going to Georgia, but for where the team is, where Marcus Freeman is, does this kind of move the needle, do you think, on a national level? Is like, you're kind of plugged in at watching college football at that.
It's interesting. People want to bang on Notre, like the Georgia game. You brought up a couple years back. Like, I look at it as a positive. I know they didn't win the game, and they were in it, had the lead, the whole thing, but it showed me they could play with them. I mean, that's as tough as a place. So, like, I don't know, judging quarterbacks on how many Super Bowls they win, I'm not into that. Like, I want to, I know what guys could do. So with Notre Dame, I've always had the respect. Clemson going in there, COVID, and they win. Like, that's a monster step. And going into this past week, I thought Elko and A&M had the best chance to jumpstart your season more than anybody in the country. When you talk about who was coming in and what was at stake with all the eyeballs and everything there, I thought Elko had the chance to do it. I think Matt Rule has it coming now in the week 2. But as far as Notre Dame, I think the naysayers can't use their old adage of, what are you going to do when you play a true road game in an SEC? That idea. But again, I was different because I had a high opinion of Notre Dame because of that defense and what I want on the road. And if my team's going to go far in the postseason, offensive lines travel and defenses always travel. That you need those two things. And I knew Notre Dame had an elite part of one, and that's why I was confident in them to win the game. And you see it. There's ebbs and flaws, and there's you're going down. But being on the Notre Dame sideline and seeing them come off after that drive where A&M gets the field goal, you could be like, all right, we're in it. We know what they got. There was no surprises. We know they might do this, do that, but everybody was on the same page. I love how Golden goes to every group while they're on the bench. I really think that's huge. And him being a former head coach and knowing what you have to do on the road and always being on the same page. And you saw that. I think defensive now, interested with the communication system, but there is, you hear coaches talk about all the time. There can't be a shortage of communication. Over communicate. And in that environment, they did a great job, and I think you saw it with errant throws. Guys were in place where they're supposed to be, and that's why they got those turnovers.
You've seen Riley Leonard now twice, I think, up close. Last year, the Duke Notre Dame game, and this past weekend. Notice any differences just from last year or this year, playing with Mike Elko versus playing against them, and just what are your overall impressions of him?
I thought his mantra of taking care of the football was more evident this year. I go back to the scramble where he slides in bounds on their sideline to stay in bounds, getting that first down, just things like that. No, again, just going to College Station and getting a win, whatever it took. Can he be better thrown? Yeah, of course. It's his first game, and, they a lot of change in that receiver core. So I just looked at it as a more just more emphasis on taking care of the football. Like, hey, this is what we got. All right, we're in a tie game. We're up 3. You could see he was playing to the situation, which always makes me feel great. The experience, people want to, talk about last year, the injury, but like statistically, his best year was 22. And that's where he really wowed people. But his stature, his body, I'm not a big fan of number 13, but he made it look good. So I loved what I saw from him. And again, everybody talks to, he can't throw the deep ball. All right, give him a little bit of time. Guys can get better at those things. And they're going to have to do that to get people, out of the box. And, the old adage of, stop the run. We're going to, block us, blah, 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 whatever you want to do. We'll outnumber you. Dan Brock knows that. Look at what he did with superior talent throwing the football. Is how they threw the ball down the field with LSU. That's where I talk about with the evolution of the offense. You will see more of that with that. So I loved what I saw from Riley.
Yeah, it was interesting talking to Denbrock on Tuesday night, and I asked him just sort of about the game plan, and essentially he was like, "Look, I called the game the way I called it because I had to, not because I necessarily wanted to call
Yeah.
a screen pass on 3rd and 13.
Yeah.
That's just like where our offensive line was." One of I think the national perception that has changed a lot on Notre Dame is just sort of the team speed part of it. And you got into the defense a little bit. You're watching, KVA number 27 or Jalen Sneed number 3, Morris and Christian Gray is new, 29, and Don Schuler number 8. What just in terms of a speed element, I was curious, when you get out and see these other national programs,
Yeah.
I feel like Notre Dame is kind of right there. Cause when I watch them, I feel like this is a different style of defense that they can play now because they've got the speed to do it.
No doubt. And that's what I talk about with Watson, Clark. They've played so much football.
Mm-hmm.
They know what they could get away with. They know when they could take a chance there or when they got to be buttoned up and hone in on a big 3rd down, whether you're in man or zone. But again, being on the same page, but talent-wise, yeah. I mean, again, the youngness, I was going through it. Bowen, Villamasa, Osbury, Gray, they're either freshmen or sophomores, right?
Yeah, they're KVA is a freshman. The other one are sophomores.
Yeah, I mean that's what you want because when you're talking about linebackers, and if there was ever a thing that Notre Dame, I mean, you pride yourself on the defensive line last year. Now you get another year of those linebackers. All right, what does it take to be a factor here and bring in that physicality? A&M, tries to do some funky stuff. They're kind of outmanned on the offensive line, but the way Notre Dame brought the line of scrimmage on A&M's side was evident early. And one other thing, just about the offense, the skill is there for sure. I mean, Mitch is going to be there. He's only going to get better. That's another big factor I think Denbrock will take advantage of. I think he's a great athlete, and he's got an awesome stature to himself. But I did notice Notre Dame was way more crisp in the run game out of halftime. And with the iPads and all that, I feel like that's I feel like it's a new conversation coaches have to have now. It's like, hey, how are we taking on, when we're off the field and when we're going into halftime? Like that has to be as efficient and productive as anything you do in a game because it's something that it's a huge advantage. I think to where NFL's getting, still shots, but to be able to watch that you have to be dialed in there and in an atmosphere like that. And what's at stake in that game, I thought Notre Dame was fantastic from a staff standpoint.
Steve, how does what you saw Saturday night change your outlook for this team, if it does at all? I think you predicted them to win, but
no, it does. It really doesn't. I've said, we were talking before. Everybody talked about Florida State going there. That's the setup night game, right?
Yep.
In South Bend. I always thought it was Louisville, just from what Brown brings to his standpoint. What happened last year will be a big game. I think that's the biggest game. I know fans have had fun with their home games that they're going to get to see in person this year. So I look at Louisville as the game where they can really solidify being top 5 because I don't see them losing. And as other teams get picked off, they're going to be there. And I know, they have their own nuances with the playoff as far as not being a conference champion, but I thought it was huge to, you always say you go out and get the win. You find out about what you have on your team when you go on the road and you get a win. Like all that stuff is said. Every coach in America says it, but now you did it, and that's where I think you learn so much about yourself. And watching pregame, you could see Coach Freeman was fired up to let the country show what his team had. And it was awesome to watch. As a former player going on the road and winning, there's nothing better. Nothing. And I'm not even talking about how much better the flight home is. I'm just talking about that feeling you get when it's a really great sense of accomplishment in that place, especially knowing the Loud and what you dealt with and what you fought through and the adversity you faced. To be able to say you're 1-0 in that, I think it's a testament and nothing but the best things for Notre Dame, as I thought in the preseason.
I want to double back with Nick Saban joining the show and just sort of like how you've tried to take advantage of that, make that work, not overuse it, highlight.
That's the key. I have a million questions.
Yeah.
I think I got 3 answered. And he's all fired about, what picks is he going to make? Just from I think the NIL, the dynamic of the locker room, he's been really open about. I mean, he said it on the show. If you're spending $20 million on the wrong places, you're shit out of luck. Like it's true. It's fact. Like he's lived it. And the idea about how he's talked about teams' approach as to where you are spending your money, or are you using it to fill holes? And it's been really, really smart. He didn't want to do it. He admitted it. He's like, if I don't adapt, I'm gonna your program, your stature, it's gonna die. And he had to do it. So I just think of him being open about how the portal happens, and how there's you go to the agent now. That stuff is fascinating, because that's the stuff where the team games are done. We're pretty much done, but those guys, it doesn't stop. And I've always said in the SEC, that thing is a day-to-day job. Like you're recruiting every day. You're doing something. Whereas I don't think other teams, take Stanford for instance, schools out in the Pac-12, that they didn't get that, and you saw that in recruiting over the years. Dan Lanning from the SEC goes out west, Oregon, and there you have an emphasis on recruiting. I don't think they understood what the time and effort the SEC in the top programs. Clemson was great at is still great at recruiting too. So put them in there. But the idea of what recruiting is now is a full-time 365-day a year job, and hearing that and getting confirmation on that from Coach Saban was really, really interesting.
Gotta ask, does he have any gambling questions for you, or if you had to educate him on like what point spreads means and things of that nature?
It's funny.
On the set picking games, he was like, "Wait, you just pick games? Like I study film all week to prepare for an opponent."
Correct. We actually had a conversation Friday. They said, Coach, we do the super dog, right? So you got to pick an underdog of more than 4 points, and if you win the game, you get the difference of the spread plus 5 points. If you cover, you get 5 points. So I'm like, Coach, and he's just like, who am I going to pick? And well, if I pick a double digit, I said, if you like a double digit dog, that's the best way. I said, McAfee picked Colorado week 1 last year. We could never catch him. He got 26 points because Colorado was a 21-point underdog, and he got the 5 for the cover. Says we tried and we couldn't get there. And he's like, oh, double digit. He's like, yeah, but they're double digits for a reason. I'm like, exactly. I said, that's part of the problem. And then I got him. It's really just math though, Coach. If you want to just add 5 to the biggest number and you get that, you're going to be in the lead. So then of course, Coach Corso and Herbie have Vandy. So now they got a giant lead in the standing. So that I can't wait for Friday's meeting, because that's when everybody puts their Coach Corso's usually first. I think Jimmy, our producer, gets his on Tuesday. I mean, he's in the house early, and everybody pieces around together. So it's so much fun, and seeing Coach's initial reaction, like that's why I think the end of the show was as great as it was, because of how genuine he was. He's like, I never knew any of this existed. This is so much fun. And bare-chested Pat's got his arm around him. And Coach Corso's dance, like, it's what we bring to the table, which makes it great. And you could see the genuineness that he had, because he was so locked in. It was never apart. He's not watching it. I mean, I thought that was as evident as anything, where you could see that, these guys say we don't pay attention to that game day. He's not watching that. He'll go on for an interview, but he's not watching what we're doing. So it's really, really been cool of how he's reacted to things that are happening to him, or he's being involved with things for the first time. That's what's been so fun.
Yeah, it's a great product. And I mean, it's just like, yeah, you add the greatest of all time to it. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that.
And what's interesting, guys, is being at ESPN over 20 years, I think, on the old radio side or just Sports Center side, you get NBA analysts, former coaches that came in. They're not giving you anything. They know they want to get back in and get back to coaching. So, they're not opening the doors, right? And now what I think you saw with coaches, there's no prying in any direction. Like, this is what he's doing. And every time he talks, you learn something. And that's, for me, when I'm watching, that's what I want. If I'm watching, I'm throwing a comedy if I want to laugh. If I'm throwing on a show, I want to be able to learn something. It's been as big a learning experience in 2 weeks as I've ever had in my life, and doing this as long as I had. It really has been really, really productive. And I just think it makes us that much better, because now when people see what he's putting in, their own, your onus is got to be verified too, and it makes everybody better. It not just naturally him doing that has made everybody better.
Can't let you go without any tight end questions. I'm guessing you're a Raiders fan this year because Mayer and Bowers are on the same team, which is going to be fun to watch. But
yeah,
where's Notre Dame's tight end play? A little underwhelming, I think. I thought, backtrack. We thought we'd see more Mitchell Evans than we did.
Correct. Yeah, I
wasn't there all the way. What do you project for that group going forward this year?
I look at what Denbrock did. I go back to Mason Taylor at LSU. I mean, they threw him to the wolves as a true freshman, and now I put him up there. I mean, watching Michigan this past week, it's not pretty, but what their own. They got to get the ball to Loveland, and they did it in a bunch of different ways, which is really cool to see, knowing how talented he is. And I think he got faster, which is awesome for him. Watch it on tape. But Big Mitch, that's what Tommy Reese used to call Big Mitch. And he's like, wait till you see this kid. And that was during the Mayer days.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember being on the sidelines in Charlottesville when they came down there. And I'm like, holy mo! I mean, was he a true sophomore then or a true freshman?
Might have been his freshman.
Yeah, he might have been. And he's a Cincinnati kid, right?
Ohio. Yeah,
right around there.
Yep.
And he's like, we don't say the next one, we just say there's another one here. And I thought the world of the kid. I really thought he had he got banged up a bunch last year, but he played through it. And I do, when you get that big, there's not that much more area to hit, So I think him with another year, I think he's the progress of that position. So yeah, with Denbrock, the way he uses tight ends is awesome. And I think it's only going to be better as Notre Dame moves along this season, and something that fans can, I would think, anticipate seeing is more involvement. So no way am I giving up on that position. Come on now, Matt.
It's probably a good business decision right there. Well, Stanford Steve, we appreciate you coming on the show. Hopefully we will see you later in the year.
I was going to say,
it's going pretty
might
well.
Be later than usual, boys.
Yes.
Undefeated USC, undefeated Notre Dame. Forget Ohio State, Michigan.
I thought, it's funny. We'll poke Herbie and Dez about, other options for Saturday of Thanksgiving. And I believe Iron Bowl's back Saturday. Reese and I were kidding we're coming back to College Station Thanksgiving weekend.
Ooh,
so it'll, that took a hit, obviously. But, I mean, we're playing a ton of games. But, yeah, that would be, it's funny. I mean, you guys have done this forever. How that game, I mean, I'm trying to think of the kid, the quarterback, the 12-year when they went out there, ugly game.
Oh, Colson,
Tommy Reese combo probably.
No, I was thinking about SC's quarterback situation.
Oh, Barkley.
Mitch Mustaine?
Barkley got hurt.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Barkley got, we've never gotten that where it used to be. I felt when I was a kid, it was always, all right, now I get to see Notre Dame against, the Pac-12, a good USC team. It's more USC not filling up their end of the bargain on that one. But it's always, I mean, we talk about a uniform game. That's as good as it gets. So hopefully, fingers crossed. I'd love some sunshine late. I always root for the sunshine late in the season, boys. So that'd be awesome.
We can hang out in Manhattan Beach again. And by the way, my hot take for that game after last night's announcement, I think Reggie Bush is going to lead them out of the tunnel that game. He already said he's working on a day with USC to do it. I could think of no more iconic way for him to do it than in the Notre Dame game, especially if Notre Dame's 11-0.
I think they might have to use it for Penn State. We'll see. Maybe both. If they win Penn State, definitely. You won again.
Good luck, Charlie. All right. Well, Steve, thanks again for joining the show. And hopefully we will see you later on this season on a Notre Dame sideline.
You got it, guys. Thanks again for having me.
Collins now 3 catches to lead the way for 32 yards. Leonard out of the shotgun, hands it off to Price up the middle. Jukes his way left across the 40, turns the corner, down the 30.
Let's go.
Here he goes, inside the 20, inside the 10, and Jadarian Price is in for the touchdown. Notre Dame takes the lead.
All right, thanks for Stanford Steve for stopping by the show. Some good insight on Nick Saban. And Matt, we usually save our picks for the end of the show, midweek, when we're not doing a live show. A lot less drama around the picks this week, looking ahead to Northern Illinois. But, I mean, there is some intrigue, but it's definitely kind of one of those games where you're kind of looking past the final score to see what is most interesting.
Great superdog potential here, to put it in Steve's terms. 28-point spread. So I guess hey, people keep score, Pete. It's not just wins and losses. It's covers, it's pushes, it's over-unders, although I think anyone who knew anything about anything with A&M and Notre Dame last week knew that was going to be an under, and it played out that way. This one's a little more complicated. 44.5 is the over-under. Again, 28-point spread in favor of Notre Dame. Look, NIU is an interesting program. I mean, historically, they've been the best in the MAC. It's been a little uneven under Thomas Hammock, some really good seasons, some really poor seasons. You got choose hard versus the hard way in this one. That's NIU's mantra. They call these games their boneyard victories. They have 18 of them against Power 5 competition. First time they played Notre Dame, and first ever network broadcast television game NIU's ever been on, which now that I read that in their notes, I'm like, well, that's got to be a lot of teams that do that, right? Like Marshall, like this is like, we talk about Notre Dame being like the holy grail for some of these opponents. Yeah, this is probably the first time they've been on NBC or ABC or anything like that. So look, it's not a bad football team. It's a team that's probably going to compete to win the MAC this year. Ethan Hampton, their quarterback, was phenomenal, albeit against Western Illinois, 18 of 20, 5 touchdowns. 328 yards. And by the way, I don't know if you saw, Purdue has off this week, so they got a bye going into Notre Dame. Did you see Hudson Card against Indiana State?
I did not.
24 of 25 with 5 touchdowns. So, 4 touchdowns, 273 yards. So he's on a hot streak. We'll be carrying a hot streak going into the Notre Dame game next week. But I think, I think it's only natural there will be a bit of a letdown, at least early, for Notre Dame after the emotions of last week. The weather's going to be completely different. I think it's going to be in the 60s for this one. NIU is obviously going to come in with a chip on their shoulder. I don't know what, if anything, they'll be able to do offensively, although they've got a really good receiver in Trayvon Rudolph, and Ontario Brown is a guy who I think ran for over 300 yards in a game last season. They've got some skill there. I think they've got enough to cover. I mean, they're not going to win this game, but it wouldn't surprise me if Notre Dame takes a little bit longer than we expect to really assert their authority in this one and eventually pull away with a 20-plus point win.
Could be. I mean, 4 touchdowns is a big spread.
It's a big spread with a low over-under.
Yeah. But at the same time, like Notre Dame total points, I see is 37.5. I feel like that's probably a pretty good line or a pretty good over-under. Like I do think that Notre Dame it's kind of like the first step in the offense, finding a new gear, and it's probably like it needs to be a 3-week process. So what you see against Louisville is different than what you saw against Texas A&M. So I think it's fair to look at Notre Dame's offense and not expect it to be a finished product in week 2. Like Denbrock would probably in a private moment tell you exactly the same thing. So yeah, I like Notre Dame to win. Covering might be difficult, but it's like I think if Notre Dame covers, it's because like Northern Illinois scores 7 points. I have but that again, it's a letdown factor there for Notre Dame's defense too. And then maybe by the end of the game, you're seeing second, third team players in, and feels like one of those games where Northern Illinois could score a touchdown with 2 minutes to go that would have significant gambling implications, but nothing to do with the actual game itself.
We'll have Steve back on next week to do a bad beat segment if that happens. I'll take Notre Dame 38-14. That's a push, and the over. And I think it's going to be kind of like you said. I think it'll be a little uneven offensively early. I think points will be extremely hard to come by if you're NIU, but I could see them backdooring this one pretty easily. Not easily, but I think that's a very realistic scenario against backups. And look, this NIU's Super Bowl, right? I mean, again, they've won in these spots before, not this big, and they're not going to do it, I think, Saturday against Notre Dame. But I think this is among the better MAC teams. They'll see the best MAC team probably in Miami of Ohio in a couple of weeks. But I've got a push, which is a very specific prediction. And what you said, the team total is 37.5. I did not know that. So I guess I got barely over for the team total for Notre Dame.
I was going to go 37 to 10. So I think we essentially have the same
cover,
pick, just like adjust the dial a little bit. It should be a comfortable win that lets Notre Dame get done what it needs to get done. Like I don't know if going out and winning 52-7 is like all that important.
Well, like that was last year, right? Like,
yeah,
they finished great offensively,
Right.
statistically under Jared Parker, but we knew there was a lot of empty calories there.
yeah. This is like, I think, a game that Notre Dame can treat seriously, and NIU is good for a MAC team, but it's not. I think it's a game that the more important part of it for Notre Dame is like getting Knapp, Pendleton, Craig, Schrouth, Wagner more experience together. And that, I wonder if the coaching staff would let the first team guys play more because of that, especially on offense, because they need the work, they need the reps. That might make this game even a little bit more complicated from a betting point of view, because perhaps the offense plays longer because they just need more work. I think coming out of this game, we'll probably be talking a lot more about Riley Leonard, the passer, in a good way. I think that, defensively, I don't know how much better they can be than they were last week. So if they just sort of keep that going, maybe the offense gets to stretch out a little bit, take some deep shots, maybe a little bit more Greathouse, Mitchell, Harrison, maybe you get to go a little bit deeper with a KK Smith or a Micah Gilbert, somebody like that. So it should be a comfortable win. Our post-game podcast probably won't go an hour like it did against Texas A&M. I had somebody come up to me and be like, "Oh my gosh, I just couldn't believe how long you guys talked. What was there to say?" But there was plenty to say after
that one.
There was a lot to say after Texas A&M. After
talking.
Northern Illinois, I think we might be spinning it pretty quickly towards Purdue.
I think you're right. I hope you're right for everyone's sake. And I do think we will see them try to get those receivers involved a lot more this week and try to see Riley Leonard work on that deep ball a lot more this week. What's that mean for the offensive line? What's that mean as far as, well, control the line of scrimmage, but controlling the clock? I don't know. But I definitely think Notre Dame's going to try some new things offensively this week because they can. 10-0 all time against MAC opponents. Again, they've got 2 on the schedule this month. Notre Dame, by the way, up to number 5 in the AP, just 7 in the coaches poll. And Dan Hicks makes his long-awaited return to the broadcast booth for NBC, which will be music to the ears of everybody.
Yes. All right. Well, that will wrap it up there for this episode of The Independent. Matt and I will be back for your Sunday morning, hopefully not therapy session, more just a casual dog walk podcast. But we'll be back after the game. Northern Illinois kicks off 3:30 on NBC here at Notre Dame Stadium. Home opener for the Irish and Marcus Freeman. So we'll have plenty to talk about over the weekend. So until then, he's Matt. I'm Pete. Thanks for being with us on the latest episode of The Independent.